When two officers forcefully removed a black female Secret Service agent from an airplane, they had no idea who they were dealing with. But this wasn't just any passenger. It was Special Agent Alexandra Williams, one of the most highly trained protective detail agents in the United States Secret Service. What happened next would leave everyone on board in complete shock. If you believe in standing up against injustice and fighting for what's right, subscribe now to join our community of truth seekers. Special Agent Williams settled into her seat on the commercial flight, her expression neutral but her senses razor-sharp, alert to every movement in her surroundings. As one of the elite agents assigned to protect high-level officials, she had been specifically selected for this covert detail. The president would be boarding shortly. Dressed in plain clothes to avoid drawing attention, Williams maintained her focus on her duty, discreetly monitoring the aisle and incoming passengers. She adjusted her posture slightly, ensuring the holstered firearm strapped to her leg remained concealed, a standard precaution for agents, even on commercial flights. As the plane continued filling with passengers, two police officers, Officer Richard Thompson and Officer James Mitchell, entered and made their way down the aisle. Their eyes moved methodically over each face, scanning the cabin as they walked to their assigned seats. When they saw Williams, a young black woman sitting alone, their gazes lingered, curiosity shifting quickly into scrutiny. They exchanged pointed glances, eyebrows raised as they took in her appearance and composed demeanor, each silently feeding into the other's unspoken suspicions. The officers, both uniformed and seated only a few rows behind Williams, continued to observe her, growing increasingly unsettled. To them, something didn't feel right. They couldn't understand why a black woman, especially one with an air of quiet authority, was seated on a plane with the president about to board. Their suspicion began to grow, overshadowing any logical explanation as they leaned into their assumptions, thinking it unlikely she had any legitimate reason to be there. If you believe in the power of storytelling to expose prejudice and promote understanding, take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Minutes passed, and with each passing moment, the officers' doubts solidified into certainty. Finally, unable to restrain their suspicions, Thompson and Mitchell stood, stepping into the aisle and making their way over to Williams. Their expressions were guarded, but edged with hostility as Thompson spoke first, his tone flat but probing. "Ma'am, can we see some ID?" Thompson demanded, his gaze fixed on Williams with barely concealed accusation. Williams looked up, surprised but maintaining her composure, noting their confrontational tone and stance. She could see the suspicion in their eyes, a wariness that seemed out of place, but all too familiar. "I'm with the Secret Service," Williams said, keeping her voice level and professional. She moved slowly, reaching for her identification, but the officers cut her off, dismissing her response with obvious skepticism. "Secret Service?" "Sure," Mitchell muttered, his disbelief plain. "And what exactly are you doing on this flight?" "I'm here on official business," Williams answered simply, hoping to diffuse the tension. But the officers' expressions only hardened, their disbelief deepening as Williams shifted slightly in her seat. Mitchell's gaze dropped, catching sight of the firearm strapped to Williams' leg. His eyes widened in alarm, and he immediately drew back, his hand moving to his own holstered weapon. "She's got a gun!" Mitchell yelled, his voice carrying through the cabin. "Everyone stay calm. This woman is a threat." The announcement sent a ripple of panic through the passengers, who began murmuring nervously and glancing at each other in alarm. Before Williams could respond, both officers drew their weapons, aiming them directly at her. "Get down on the ground," Thompson shouted, his tone commanding. Passengers gasped, some ducking instinctively while others stared wide-eyed at the unfolding scene. Williams raised her hand slowly, her voice steady but urgent as she tried to explain. "Please, let me clarify. I'm authorized to carry this weapon." "I'm here on duty," she said, meeting their eyes, hoping reason would break through their hostility. But her words fell on deaf ears. The officers were too far gone in their assumptions, their fear of what they believed she represented blinding them to any logic. Take a moment now to subscribe if you believe in the importance of challenging our assumptions and fighting against discrimination. Ignoring her protests, Thompson reached for Williams roughly, grabbing her arm as he forced her onto the ground. Williams winced but complied, aware that resisting would only escalate the situation. Her hands were restrained behind her back, and she felt the cold bite of the cuffs on her wrists as the officers searched her, stripping her of her personal items, including her Secret Service badge. They pocketed it without a second glance, too fixated on their perceived threat to examine it closely. Thompson and Mitchell exchanged a grim nod, certain they had neutralized a serious threat. Their shouts for calm continued as they secured Williams' weapon, treating her with the severity they reserved for known criminals. Williams lay on the ground, her face pressed against the rough carpet, frustration simmering within her. She understood too well that her race and gender, combined with their assumptions, had made them see her as a threat first and a person second. The officers wasted no time hauling Williams to her feet, keeping her hands bound tightly as they escorted her off the plane. As they walked her down the aisle, passengers stared, some whispering in shock, others simply watching with wide, fearful eyes. Williams' heart sank. She wanted to assure them that she was no danger, that she was there to protect, not harm. But the officers kept her moving, their expressions set in stone, their suspicions unchecked. As they exited the plane, the officers led Williams through the bustling terminal, drawing stares from onlookers as they made their way toward the airport security office. Williams' mind raced with frustration and mounting concern, knowing her absence could seriously compromise the president's security. Despite her repeated attempts to explain, the officers ignored her, too committed to their mistaken narrative to question their actions. If you believe in the power of truth prevailing over prejudice, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. Once inside the dimly lit security office, they roughly pushed Williams into a metal chair, their eyes cold and unyielding. "You think we're just going to take your word for it?" Mitchell sneered, towering over her. "We're going to find out exactly what you're up to." Williams met their stares, her jaw clenched, but her gaze steady. She knew the truth would eventually come to light, but in that moment, bound and stripped of her authority, she felt the full weight of their prejudice, a barrier that no badge or rank could seemingly break. "I'm telling you again," Williams said, her voice firm despite her growing frustration. "I am a federal agent tasked with protecting the President of the United States. Every second you keep me here puts his security at risk." Thompson scoffed, pacing the small room with an air of superiority. "Right, and I'm the Queen of England. A woman like you, Secret Service? Please." His dismissive tone carried years of ingrained bias, each word dripping with skepticism. Williams straightened in her chair, dignity intact despite the handcuffs biting into her wrists. "My credentials are in the badge you confiscated. If you'd just take a moment to verify - quiet." Mitchell interrupted, slamming his hand on the desk beside her. "We've dealt with people like you before, always having some story, some excuse. But sneaking a weapon onto a plane? That's a whole different level." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Williams calculated her next move. She knew that somewhere above them, the presidential flight was now compromised, missing a crucial member of its security detail. Time was running out, and these officers' prejudices were putting lives at risk. If you stand against discrimination and believe in justice, subscribe now to join our community. Meanwhile, aboard the plane, the absence of Special Agent Williams had not gone unnoticed. Senior Agent Marcus Rodriguez, scanning the cabin during final security checks, immediately recognized the gap in their protective formation. His heart rate quickened as he realized one of their most skilled agents was nowhere to be seen. "Has anyone seen Agent Williams?" Rodriguez asked through his comm device, his voice tight with concern. The responses came back negative, and a knot of worry formed in his stomach. Within minutes, the story of her forceful removal began circulating among the crew. "They did what?" Chief of Staff Benjamin Harris exclaimed, his face darkening with anger as he received the report. "They detained her as a suspected terrorist?" The irony of the situation wasn't lost on him. one of their most capable agents, reduced to a threat because of nothing more than prejudiced assumptions. The president, Chen, sat quietly as she absorbed the information, her expression hardening with each detail. "They removed her from this flight?" she asked, her voice carrying an edge of steel. "Based on what evidence?" Back in the security office, the interrogation continued. Thompson loomed over Williams, his questions becoming increasingly aggressive. "Who are you working with? How long have you been planning this?" Williams remained composed, though her patience was wearing thin. "I've already told you, I'm a Secret Service agent. Every minute you waste here puts the president at risk. Check my credentials. Make the calls. Do your jobs properly. Your jobs." Mitchell laughed coldly. "That's rich, coming from someone caught trying to smuggle a weapon onto a presidential flight. You really expect us to believe the Secret Service would send someone like you?" "Someone like me?" Williams repeated, her voice quiet but sharp. "Tell me, Officer Mitchell, what exactly do you mean by that?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Both officers shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of how their assumptions might sound when spoken aloud. The tension in the room was broken by a commotion outside. Voices approached, carrying authority and urgency. The door burst open, and Chief of Staff Harris strode in, followed by the president herself and several other Secret Service agents. The officers' faces drained of color as they recognized the entourage. President Chen's eyes immediately found Williams, taking in her restrained position and professional composure despite the situation. "Release her. Now." The president's voice cut through the room like a blade. Thompson and Mitchell scrambled to comply, fumbling with the handcuffs as the reality of their mistake began to sink in. "Ma'am, we were just following protocol," Thompson stammered, his earlier confidence evaporating. "We had reason to believe " "Reason to believe what, exactly?" President Chen interrupted, her tone arctic. "That a black woman couldn't possibly be a Secret Service agent? That your assumptions and prejudices were more reliable than proper procedure and professional courtesy." As the handcuffs fell away, Williams stood, rubbing her wrists but maintaining her dignified bearing. The president turned to her, genuine concern in her eyes. "Agent Williams, are you all right?" "Yes, Madam President," Williams responded, her voice steady. "Though I apologize for the breach in security protocol my absence may have caused." "The only breach here," President Chen stated firmly, "was caused by the unfounded actions of these officers. Their prejudices could have cost lives today. If you believe in holding people accountable for their actions and fighting against systemic bias, subscribe to join our movement for change." The officers stood rigid, the full weight of their error crushing down on them as they faced not only their mistake, but the highest authority in the land. Their assumptions, their biases, their rush to judgment, all laid bare in the harsh light of truth. President Chen wasn't finished. She turned back to the officers, her voice carrying the full weight of her office. "This incident will be thoroughly investigated. Agent Williams is one of our finest, and your actions today not only insulted her personally, but compromised national security. I want a full report on my desk, detailing exactly how this happened and what steps will be taken to ensure it never happens again." Standing in the security office, Special Agent Alexandra Williams faced her accusers with unwavering dignity. The officers who had so confidently detained her now stood with shoulders slumped, the weight of their mistake evident in their demeanor. President Chen's words hung in the air, sharp and unforgiving. "If you believe in the importance of challenging our biases and standing up for justice, take a moment to subscribe." "Agent Williams," President Chen continued, her voice softening slightly as she addressed her trusted protector, "would you like to say anything to these officers?" Williams stepped forward, her posture straight and professional despite the ordeal she had endured. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the room as she gathered her thoughts, choosing her words carefully. "Officers Thompson and Mitchell," she began, her voice clear and measured, "what happened today goes beyond a simple misunderstanding. Your actions weren't just an insult to me personally, they were a dangerous lapse in judgment that could have had catastrophic consequences. The officers shifted uncomfortably under her steady gaze as she continued. You saw a black woman and immediately assumed the worst. You ignored my credentials, dismissed my explanations, and treated me like a criminal. But more than that, you compromised the security of the President of the United States because you couldn't see past your own prejudices. Thompson attempted to interject. Ma'am, we were just trying to dash. To what, Officer Thompson? Williams cut him off, her voice sharp but controlled. To protect? By removing a trained federal agent from her post? By creating a critical gap in the President's security detail? Or were you simply too comfortable with your assumptions to consider any other possibility? Chief of Staff Harris stepped forward, holding Williams' confiscated badge and firearm. These were never even properly examined, he noted, his disgust evident. Basic protocol would have verified Agent Williams' credentials within minutes. Instead, you chose to escalate the situation based on nothing but prejudice. President Chen nodded grimly. This incident will be documented and reviewed by both the Secret Service and your department's Internal Affairs Division. I expect full cooperation and transparency in the investigation. If you stand against discrimination and believe in accountability, hit subscribe now. Mitchell, his face ashen, finally found his voice. Agent Williams, Madam President, we were wrong. Completely wrong. Our actions were inexcusable. Yes, they were, Williams agreed, taking her badge and weapon back from Harris. But acknowledgement is only the first step. Real change requires more than just admitting mistakes. It demands a fundamental shift in how you approach your duties and interact with the public you're sworn to protect. The President turned to address the gathered security personnel and staff who had witnessed the confrontation. Let this serve as a reminder to all of us. Prejudice and bias have no place in law enforcement or any other profession. They don't just harm individuals, they compromise our entire system of security and justice. As Williams prepared to return to her duties, she paused, turning back to the officers one final time. I hope you remember this day, she said, her voice carrying both authority and wisdom. Remember how quickly you jumped to conclusions. Remember how easily you dismissed evidence that didn't fit your preconceptions. And remember that the next person you profile might not have a president to intervene on their behalf. The walk back to the plane was silent, heavy with the weight of what had transpired. Passengers who had witnessed Williams' earlier removal now watched in amazement as she returned, flanked by the President and her security detail. Some faces showed embarrassment for their earlier fear and suspicion, while others displayed newfound respect. If you believe in the power of truth to overcome prejudice, subscribe to our channel now. As they settled back into their positions on the aircraft, President Chen placed a hand on Williams' shoulder. Alexandra, she said quietly, using her first name for emphasis, I want you to know that your handling of this situation showed extraordinary professionalism and grace under pressure. Those qualities are exactly why you're one of our best. Williams nodded in appreciation, already refocusing on her duties, scanning the cabin with the same vigilance that had marked her career. The incident hadn't shaken her commitment to her role. If anything, it had strengthened her resolve to excel, to continue breaking down barriers and challenging preconceptions through excellence and dedication. Back in the airport security office, Thompson and Mitchell sat in silence, their earlier bravado replaced by genuine remorse and reflection. The incident report forms lay before them, but the real weight of their actions couldn't be captured in standard bureaucratic language. We could have gotten someone killed today, Thompson said quietly, the reality of their mistake finally sinking in. All because we couldn't see past our own prejudices. Mitchell nodded slowly, remembering the calm dignity with which Williams had faced their accusations. She was doing her job, protecting the President, and we treated her like a criminal because we couldn't believe someone who looked like her could be Secret Service. The sounds of the busy airport filtered through the office walls as both officers contemplated how this day would change their approach to law enforcement. Their assumptions had nearly compromised presidential security, but more importantly, they had perpetuated the kind of systemic bias that erodes public trust and safety. As the plane finally prepared for takeoff, Williams settled into her position, her training and instincts as sharp as ever. The incident had been a stark reminder of the prejudices that still existed, but it had also shown how truth and professionalism could triumph over bias and ignorance. President Chen, observing her trusted agent back at her post, felt a mixture of pride in Williams' handling of the situation and determination to ensure such incidents became increasingly rare. The day's events had demonstrated both the persistent challenge of prejudice and the importance of standing firm against it. For Special Agent Alexandra Williams, this was more than just another day on the job. It was a testament to the ongoing struggle for respect and recognition faced by countless professionals who don't fit traditional expectations. Her response to adversity had turned a potential tragedy into a powerful lesson about judgment, justice, and the importance of looking beyond appearances. As the aircraft lifted into the sky, Williams allowed herself a small smile. She had faced down prejudice with dignity, upheld her duty with unwavering professionalism, and hopefully taught some valuable lessons along the way. In the end, that's what real change looks like. One interaction, one realization, one step forward at a time. If you believe in the power of stories to change hearts and minds, join our community by subscribing now. The events of that day would be remembered not just as a cautionary tale about the dangers of prejudice, but as a powerful reminder that true security comes from justice, understanding, and the courage to challenge our own assumptions. For in the end, it's not just about protecting people, it's about protecting the values that make us who we are.